Throwaway account, obviously. I'm not posting this for sympathy or karma or some edgy. Look how bad I am. Flex. I'm older now, quieter, and the noise in my head doesn't shut up unless I let some of it out. So here goes. This happened years ago, back when I thought being scared was the same thing as being alive. I've done a lot of dumb, illegal things in my life, but this one sticks because it taught me a math problem I still can't unlearn. 10 minutes of adrenaline can cost you years of peace. The crime was stealing an expensive car. Not joyriding, not borrowing. Stealing. Clean, intentional, my now kind of stealing. At the time, my motives felt reasonable to me, which is embarrassing in hindsight. I was broke, angry, and convinced the world owed me something it kept refusing to hand over. I just lost a job I hated but depended on, my girlfriend had moved out, and every night felt like I was stuck watching other people's lives through glass. I wanted control. I wanted proof I wasn't invisible. I grew up around people who treated rules like suggestions. Crime wasn't glamorous, but it was normal. You heard stories at barbecues the way other families talked about vacations. So when the idea came to me, really came to me, it didn't arrive wearing a ski mask. It came dressed up as a solution. I told myself it would be quick. I told myself no one would get hurt. I told myself I was smart enough to pull it off and disciplined enough to walk away clean. That last one was the lie that mattered most. I didn't know yet that the fear wouldn't end when the engine started. I thought the crime was the dangerous part. I didn't understand that the real sentence begins after you get what you wanted. The worst part is how long I sat with the idea before doing anything. Weeks, maybe longer. It lived in my head like a splinter, small, irritating, impossible to ignore. Every time I saw a sleek car glide past me while I waited for the bus, the thought poked again. I could take one. Not I want to. I could. I didn't wake up one day and decide to be a criminal. I reverse engineered it. I started paying attention. Patterns. Habits. Where people parked, how careless expensive confidence can be. You'd be amazed how often luxury is protected by nothing more than assumption. I told myself I was just observing, just curious. That was another lie. I planned like someone who wanted to feel professional. I didn't want chaos. I wanted control. I rehearsed scenarios in my head while brushing my teeth, while lying awake at night. If this happened, I'd do that. If it didn't, I'd walk away. I promised myself I'd abort at the first sign of trouble. I said that phrase, walk away, so often it started to sound noble. I also planned who I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be reckless. I wouldn't involve anyone else. I wouldn't carry anything that tied back to me. I remember feeling almost proud of that, like I had invented some ethical code inside something rotten. What I didn't plan for was how my body would react once the idea stopped being abstract. My heart rate was already changing just thinking about it. My hands would shake for no reason. I mistook that for excitement, proof I was still capable of feeling something sharp and real. The night before it happened, I barely slept. Not because I was scared, at least that's what I told myself, but because my brain wouldn't stop running simulations. Every possible ending felt acceptable as long as one thing was true. I didn't go back to feeling small. I didn't realize then that I was already paying the price. The fear had started early. I just hadn't recognized it yet. The day I decided this was the day didn't feel dramatic. That's what still messes with me. No thunder, no music cue. Just a regular afternoon where my thoughts stopped circling and landed somewhere solid and dangerous. I went through my routine like muscle memory, shower, coffee, pretending to scroll my phone while actually staring through it. I remember noticing how normal everything looked. That was unsettling. If committing a crime felt this mundane, what did that say about me? I dressed differently than usual, not in a disguised way, just neutral. I wanted to blend into the background of other people's lives. I kept telling myself I was being careful, but underneath that was something uglier. I liked how deliberate everything felt. Like I was finally the one making decisions instead of reacting to them. I double-checked my mental checklist again and again. Phone charged. Wallet empty of anything unnecessary. I left behind things that made me feel like me, photos, notes, reminders of my regular life. At the time, I thought I was minimizing risk. Now I realize I was already splitting myself in two, the guy who would do this, and the guy who would later pretend he never could. Walking out the door, I hesitated. Not in a movie way, no trembling hand on the knob, but a pause that felt like standing on the edge of a diving board. There was still time to back out. That fact hovered there, loud and uncomfortable. I ignored it. The walk itself felt longer than usual. Every sound seemed amplified. Conversations passing by, engines revving, my own footsteps. My senses were too sharp, like my body had already decided something important was about to happen, and cranked everything up in anticipation. By the time I got close, my mouth was dry and my heart was beating hard enough that I wondered if people could see it through my chest. I remember thinking, this is it. After this, there's no. Almost. That's the moment I crossed the line, not when I touched anything, not when I broke any law. It was when I stopped thinking about whether I should, and started thinking about how. The car was exactly where I'd seen it the other nights, parked under a streetlight that flickered just enough to be useless. One of those stupidly beautiful machines that looks like it doesn't belong to the real world, low, polished, expensive in a way that announces itself without saying a word. It felt obscene that something like that could just sit there unattended, like a dare. I didn't rush. That part surprises people when I tell them. I slowed down, forced myself to look casual, like I was just another guy passing through someone else's neighborhood. Inside, though, my body was buzzing. My ears rang. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The closer I got, the louder my thoughts became. Abort now. No, you're fine. Someone's watching. No one cares. It was like listening to a room full of people arguing, all of them me. When I finally stood next to it, the reality of what I was doing hit harder than I expected. This wasn't an idea anymore. This belonged to someone. Someone who probably worked hard, or at least cared enough to own it. I hesitated again, hand hovering where the door handle would be. That hesitation lasted maybe half a second. Long enough to feel it. Not long enough to respect it. I remember the sound most. The subtle click that told me I was in. It wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, but it felt like a gunshot in my head. My chest tightened. For a split second, I thought I might actually throw up. Sliding into the driver's seat felt surreal, like sitting in a display model at a dealership, except my hands were shaking and my heart was trying to escape my ribs. The interior smelled clean, expensive, leather and something faintly chemical. I closed the door softly, like politeness still mattered. I sat there for a beat, frozen, convinced this was the moment someone would knock on the window or yell my name. Nothing happened. The street stayed quiet. The world didn't react at all. That's when the adrenaline hit properly. Hot, electric, overwhelming. I realized with a mix of awe and dread that I was actually doing this, and that part of me was enjoying it. Starting the engine felt like crossing another invisible border. There's a particular sound expensive cars make when they come alive, confident, smooth, like they expect to be obeyed. When I heard it, my stomach dropped. That sound didn't belong to me. It was too loud, too unmistakable. I was suddenly sure everyone within 3 blocks could hear it, and was mentally filing my face away for later. I eased out of the spot like I was afraid of waking someone up. Every movement felt exaggerated. Turn the wheel too fast, you look suspicious. Too slow, you look suspicious. Turns out once you start worrying like that, everything feels suspicious. The first minute was pure panic. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles white, jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. I kept glancing at the mirrors, convinced flashing lights would bloom behind me any second. They didn't. The road ahead stayed empty and indifferent. That's when something unsettling happened, the fear shifted. It didn't go away, but it made room for something else, something dangerously close to joy. The car responded to me effortlessly. Every slight touch of the pedal felt amplified. I remember laughing once, out loud, a short, sharp sound that surprised me as much as it would have horrified anyone who knew me well. I told myself to keep it together. This wasn't the time to get sloppy. But adrenaline has a way of loosening your grip on logic. I started feeling untouchable, like I'd slipped into a parallel version of the world where consequences were optional. Then, at a stoplight, a guy in the car next to me glanced over. Just a normal look. Curious, maybe admiring the car. But it hit me like a slap. My heart jumped into my throat. I stared straight ahead, suddenly hyper-aware of my posture, my breathing, the way my hands rested on the wheel. Do I look like I belong here? The question repeated over and over. The light turned green. I drove on. That was the moment I understood how thin the line was. One wrong look, one wrong move, one person paying slightly more attention than usual, and this whole thing could collapse. The thrill didn't disappear after that. It sharpened. About 5 minutes in, the confidence started to rot. Up until then, everything had gone too smoothly, and my brain finally caught up with that fact. I realized I didn't actually know what came next. I had planned the theft, not the aftermath. Once the car was moving, the fantasy kind of ended. I was just a guy driving a stolen vehicle through real streets with real cameras and real consequences. Every red light felt like an interrogation. I became obsessed with my own behavior, how I sat, how often I checked mirrors, whether I was gripping the wheel like a teenager on his first lesson. I kept telling myself to relax, but my body refused. Adrenaline doesn't listen to reason. It just keeps pressing the gas. Then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I hadn't planned on notifications feeling like explosions. I didn't even look at it, just shoved it deeper into the cup holder like it was dangerous. For a second, I imagined it was the owner tracking the car in real time, watching a little dot labeled his life slide away from him. That's when I noticed the car itself felt aware. Not literally, obviously, but there were systems, alerts, subtle beeps. Things I didn't fully understand. It occurred to me that this machine was smarter than I was. That maybe it had already tattled on me. My mouth went dry again. I started bargaining internally. Just get it somewhere safe. Just park it. You can still walk away. But now walking away meant abandoning a running crime scene, not avoiding one. I'd crossed too many thresholds. I passed a group of people waiting outside a bar, laughing, loud, careless. One of them pointed at the car. I couldn't hear what he said, but they all looked. For a split second, I was convinced they knew. That they could somehow tell I didn't belong inside this shiny, expensive shell. They went back to their conversation. The world kept spinning. I drove on, heart hammering, realizing the plan hadn't failed, but it wasn't holding together the way I'd imagined. And once a plan starts cracking, every second feels borrowed. I took a turn I shouldn't have. Not because it was illegal or dramatic, just wrong. It wasn't on any mental map I'd rehearsed, and the second I committed to it, I felt that sick drop in my stomach you get when you miss an exit and know you're about to pay for it with time and stress. The street narrowed fast. Parked cars hugged both sides, forcing me into the center like a spotlight. Speed bumps appeared out of nowhere, the aggressive kind that punish you for existing. I slowed down too much, then worried that slowing down too much looked suspicious, then worried that worrying about it was making me act even stranger. That's when I saw the patrol car. It was parked, engine running, lights off. Just sitting there like it had always been there, and I'd simply wandered into its territory. My chest tightened so hard I thought something might actually tear. I didn't look directly at it. Some instinct told me that would be worse, but I felt it all the same. The presence. The weight. I drove past it at exactly the speed limit, which suddenly felt like the most incriminating thing I could do. Nothing happened. No siren. No lights. No sudden movement. I made it half a block before my hands started shaking so badly I had to pull over. I sat there, pretending to adjust something on the dashboard, breathing like I'd just run a mile. That was the moment the fear changed flavor. It stopped being sharp and exciting and turned heavy, sour. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't a story I'd someday laugh about. This was a thing actively happening, with people whose job it was to end it. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of getting caught in some abstract sense. I was afraid of being seen, of someone looking at me and knowing, instantly, that I didn't belong in this seat, behind this wheel, living this version of a life. When I pulled back onto the road, the adrenaline didn't come with confidence anymore. It came with urgency. I needed this to be over, one way or another. And that's when the car itself decided to remind me who really had control. A warning chimed. Soft. Polite. The kind of sound designed not to scare you. It worked on normal days. This was not a normal day. A message flashed on the dashboard, something about a system alert, connectivity, a feature I didn't recognize. My brain refused to process the words. All I could think was, this thing is calling home. I imagined satellites swiveling, databases lighting up, someone somewhere being told exactly where I was and what I'd done. I fiddled with the controls, instantly regretted it, then stopped touching everything altogether. My hands hovered uselessly, like I'd been told not to move during a bomb scare. The car hummed along, perfectly fine, which somehow made it worse. It didn't need me. It didn't care about my panic. It was built to perform, with or without my permission. Another beep. This one sharper. I muttered to myself, quietly, like the car could hear me. Okay. Okay. Relax. I sounded like I was talking to a skittish animal, except I was the one about to bolt. I pulled into a small parking lot behind a closed strip of stores, killed the engine, and just sat there. My shirt was damp with sweat. My leg bounced uncontrollably. I checked the mirrors again and again, convinced the cruiser would roll in at any second, lights flaring, doors slamming. Nothing happened. The silence pressed in on me. Without the engine, without motion, the reality of what I'd done got louder. I was sitting alone in a stolen car, heart racing, rehearsing explanations no one had asked for yet. I found it like this. I was just moving it. It's a misunderstanding. Lies stacked on top of each other, fragile and useless. I thought about getting out and walking away. Just leaving it there, engine off, hands clean. But the idea felt worse somehow. Like abandoning a body at the scene and hoping no one would notice. I couldn't tell if that instinct was self-preservation or cowardice. After a few minutes, maybe 10, maybe 30, time had gone weird, I started the engine again. The car came back to life like nothing had happened, cheerful and obedient. The alert didn't return. No sirens. No confrontation. That's when I understood something important and terrifying. The danger wasn't going to announce itself. It was going to wait. And so was the fear. Once I pulled back onto the road, something strange happened. The world went back to acting normal. Traffic flowed. People crossed streets. A woman walked her dog like nothing illegal was passing her by at 30 miles an hour. The contrast messed with me more than the panic had. I kept waiting for the universe to react, to flag me down, to mark me somehow. Instead, it just didn't care. That's when the rationalizations started creeping in. If it were really that serious, something would have happened by now. Maybe the owner's careless. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Those thoughts felt comforting and dangerous at the same time. They smoothed the edges of my fear just enough to let me keep going. I even started thinking about logistics again, where I could leave the car, how long I could realistically sit on it, whether I could convince myself this was temporary. Every plan felt shakier than the last. At a gas station, I pulled in without thinking. Habit. Muscle memory. The second I stopped, I realized how insane that was. I stayed in the car, engine running, staring straight ahead while someone at the next pump glanced over. He nodded, friendly. I nodded back, automatically. That nod haunted me later. Because in that moment, I looked like any other guy running errands. And that scared me more than being obvious. It meant I could blend in. It meant I could keep doing this. It meant the line I'd crossed was already starting to fade behind me. I left without getting gas, heart thudding, hands slick on the wheel. The thrill was gone now, replaced by a dull, grinding anxiety. Not the kind that screams, the kind that whispers constantly, reminding you that you're carrying something fragile and explosive at the same time. I realized then that the crime wasn't a single act. It was a state. Every second I stayed in that car, I was recommitting to it. Over and over again. And the longer I went without consequences, the harder it became to imagine stopping. It almost ended at a traffic stop. Not even for me, someone else. A sedan ahead of me got pulled over, lights flashing, that blue-red wash spilling across the street like a warning meant for anyone with a pulse. I slowed automatically, then realized slowing too much put me right next to the scene. For a second I considered turning off, but that felt abrupt, conspicuous. So I did nothing. Which somehow felt worse. I passed close enough to see the officer talking to the driver, leaning in casual. Close enough to smell the hot rubber and oil hanging in the air. Close enough that I was certain, he'd glance over and lock eyes with me and everything would be over. He didn't. But my body reacted like he had. My vision narrowed. My breathing went shallow and fast. I felt lightheaded, like I might black out behind the wheel of a car I absolutely should not crash. I remember gripping the steering wheel and thinking, if I pass out, that's it. That's the headline. That's how this ends. I drove another few blocks before pulling over again, this time in a quiet residential area. I sat there with the engine off, forehead resting against the wheel, trying not to shake apart. I'd imagined fear as something sharp and cinematic. This was just exhausting. Fear as fatigue. Fear as weight. I started rehearsing what I'd say if someone knocked on the window. I practiced keeping my voice steady, my face neutral. I even practiced looking confused instead of guilty. That's when it hit me how twisted this had become. I was role-playing innocence in advance. After a while, a guy walked past with his kid on a scooter. He glanced at me, nodded politely, kept going. That normalcy felt like mockery. I was hiding in plain sight, and it was working. I realized then that getting caught wasn't the only thing that could break me. Keeping the secret, carrying it alone, minute by minute, might do the job first. By the time night settled in properly, I'd talked myself into a strange middle ground. Not innocent. Not irredeemable. Just temporary. That was the word I kept leaning on. This is temporary. The car, the fear, the version of me behind the wheel. All of it. I parked it in a dim spot near my apartment, and just sat there, engine off, listening to it tick as it cooled. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't want to think about the owner waking up, reaching for keys, feeling that first sharp moment of confusion. I told myself they were insured. I told myself expensive cars belonged to people who landed on their feet. That's the thing about justifications, they don't make you feel good. They just make you feel less bad. And that tiny difference is enough to keep you moving. I went inside like nothing had happened. Took my shoes off. Washed my hands for too long. Every sound outside my window made me freeze. A passing car. Voices. A siren somewhere far away that I was sure was getting closer. I kept checking the window, convinced the car would be gone when I looked again. Or surrounded. Or both. It stayed where I left it, dark and silent, like it was waiting for me. Sleep didn't really happen that night. I drifted in and out, heart racing at nothing, dreaming of alarms I couldn't shut off. Every time I woke up, I had to remind myself where I was and what I'd done. Each reminder hit like a fresh wave of cold water. Morning came anyway. And with it, the realization that the 10 minutes of adrenaline were long gone, but the fear had unpacked its bags. The next few days blurred together in a way that's hard to explain unless you've lived inside a secret that hums nonstop. I went to work. I nodded at people. I laughed at the right moments. On the outside, I was painfully normal. Inside, every sound made my pulse spike. A knock on the door felt like a countdown. My phone lighting up felt accusatory. I jumped at sirens even when they were clearly miles away. I stopped enjoying anything. Food tasted flat. Music felt intrusive. Sleep came in shallow bursts, always ending with that same jolt of panic. Oh God, the car. I'd check the window like it was a reflex. Still there. Always still there. Each time it was, I felt relief immediately followed by dread. Relief meant the problem hadn't exploded yet. Dread meant it still could. The guilt crept in sideways. Not as some dramatic moral reckoning, but as small, annoying thoughts I couldn't shut off. I'd picture the owner filing a report, answering questions, pacing their living room. I imagined their anger hardening into something colder. That's what scared me most, not rage, but persistence. Rage burns out. Persistence waits. The thrill was completely gone now. What replaced it wasn't regret exactly, it was vigilance. I felt like I was constantly scanning for threats, like my nervous system had been permanently rewired. Even when nothing happened, I couldn't relax. Especially when nothing happened. That's when I realized the real cost of what I'd done. I traded boredom for paranoia. And boredom, it turns out, is a luxury. On the fourth day, the car disappeared. I noticed it the second I looked out the window, like your brain spots a missing tooth with your tongue before you're fully awake. The space where it had been was empty, clean, ordinary. No glass. No tape. No dramatic evidence. Just gone. My first reaction was relief so intense it almost knocked me over. I actually laughed, this weird breathless sound, like I'd been holding my breath for days without realizing it. It's over, I thought. Someone took it back. Insurance. Tow truck. Whatever. It's not my problem anymore. That relief lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then the questions rushed in. Who took it? When? Did they see me? Had someone been watching the building? Had I missed a knock while I was at work? I replayed the last few days in my head, searching for signs I'd ignored. A stranger lingering too long. A car parked across the street more than once. I checked my phone obsessively. No missed calls. No voicemails. No official-looking numbers. Silence, which somehow felt worse than confirmation. I went outside and stood there longer than I should have, staring at the empty spot like it might explain itself if I gave it enough time. A neighbor walked by and nodded. I nodded back. Normal. Always normal. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Every possible outcome took turns parading through my head. Maybe the owner tracked it. Maybe the police had it now. Maybe they were building a case. I imagined a knock that didn't come, footsteps that weren't there, my name spoken by someone who knew too much. I realized then that not knowing wasn't mercy. It was punishment stretched thin. Nothing happened. No knock. No call. No letter with an official seal sliding through my mail slot. Days passed, then weeks, and the silence settled into something heavy and confusing. I braced myself for consequences so completely that their absence felt unreal, like I was standing on a trapdoor that never opened. But I didn't walk away clean. Not really. I started noticing how different I was. I flinched when people said my name too suddenly. I avoided eye contact with cops even when they were just directing traffic. Every time I heard about a stolen car, even in passing, even as a joke, my stomach tightened like it was being pulled into a knot. I kept replaying it, not the thrill but the small moments, the nod at the gas station, the polite beep of the alert, the empty parking spot. Those details followed me around like loose change in my pocket, always there, always making noise when I moved. I tried to justify it retroactively. I didn't sell it. I didn't hurt anyone. It could have been worse. And sure, all of that's true. But there's a difference between avoiding the worst outcome and being okay. I hadn't crossed some dramatic point of no return, I'd just quietly changed who I was willing to be. That realization hit harder than any arrest would have. Because you can serve time for a crime. It's much harder to shake the knowledge that you're capable of it. Eventually, the fear dulled. Not because I'd made peace with it, but because the human brain can only stay at red alert for so long. Life crept back and around the edges. And yet, even now, years later, there are moments, random, stupid moments, when I'll see a car that looks like that one and feel my chest tighten. That's when I know it never really ended. I'm telling this now because time has a way of sanding down the sharp edges, and I don't want to lie to myself about what happened by letting it fade into something harmless. I got away with it. Legally. Practically. On paper, I won. There's no record with my name on it, no sentence I can point to and say, that's what it cost me. But that's also the problem. When there's no official ending, your brain keeps writing one. What I learned, too late, but permanently, is that fear doesn't need handcuffs to do damage. It just needs uncertainty. It needs you to know that a version of your life could have collapsed at any moment, and that it was entirely your fault. That knowledge sits with you. Quietly. Patiently. If you're reading this because you're flirting with an idea like I did, something illegal, risky, just once, here's the part people don't emphasize enough: the crime is the shortest chapter. The aftermath is the book. You don't just steal an object or a moment, or a rush. You steal calm from your future self. You steal the ability to hear a siren without doing mental math. I used to think consequences were about getting caught. Now I know better. Consequences are about what you have to carry when you don't. I'm not proud of this story. I'm not even sure I'm fully past it. But I am certain of one thing: no thrill is worth years of looking over your shoulder, even when there's nothing there. If you ever find yourself standing on that edge, telling yourself you're smart enough, careful enough, special enough, walk away. Not because you'll definitely get caught. Because even if you don't, something in you will know. And it will remember.